Hi, everybody. Jill Allen here from Jill Allen and Associates. And I'm so excited to be here with Dean Steinman from Ortho Marketing. We are going to be doing a 3-part series called Building Your Practice Dream Team. We're going to be bringing you part 1, Core Team Values.
Orthomarketing.com, 360-degree digital marketing solutions for your practice.
Well, hi, everybody. This is Dean Steinman from Ortho Marketing, and we're back with another podcast for you. And I'm so excited to have with me Jill Allen from Jill Allen Associates. We are here doing a 3-part podcast series about building your practice dream team. And today we're talking about part 1, which is creating core team values. Jill, how are you today, my dear?
I'm good, Dean. I'm so excited to be doing this as well. I think this is going to be a really fun 3-part series, and I'm just really excited to be, really working our way through, especially starting with core values, because I think that is something that practices need, especially when you're, kind of rolling that in with marketing as well.
You're right. It's so important, and it's funny, when I talk to a practice and I initially speak to them, we say, what's your differentiator? What makes you different than anybody else in the market? And everybody says, well, we give you great results and this and that, but at the end of the day, it's the values of the practice and the way they interact and the way they get the day going. So let's talk a little bit about how do you build up core values and what actually is it? So let's start at the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
As the song goes, we'll start from the very beginning.
Absolutely.
So Jill, tell me, how do you define core values?
Yeah. So, I think when we think about core values, sometimes, it seems like this really big concept, and it can feel a bit overwhelming, I think, for doctors and practices, whether you're a small practice or a large practice. It can just feel like this really, really big, like it's hard to put your fingers on, it's really untangible thing. But when you really break it down, what we're trying to do with core values is, get 5 to 7 things that define you as a doctor and then you as your practice. And when I think about this, I always tell my teams, what we're looking for is, what is your perception of how you want to be perceived by your patients, by your online presence, by your community. And if we can pull that back to core values, I think that really helps us define that. That makes sense.
It does. But now the question is, how does someone even know what to even look at? Because as you know, as somebody who is an orthodontist or a specialist and they're focused on their main tasks and their main training, so how do they even get them to think outside those parameters to even know what a core value is? Because at the end of the day, they just want to get people straighter teeth.
Yeah.
Okay. So how does somebody even know what a core value is, and how do they figure out how they want to position the practice? Because at the end of the day, sure, they want to be part of the community and they want to, but they just want to get people straighter teeth.
Yeah.
So how do you even figure out a pool of what core values are and choosing your best ones that will define you?
Right. So I think a really great exercise that you can do, and we're going to have this as part of this white sheet that you can, download. But one of the things that you can do is just first start by self-reflection. So as a doctor, what are things that I want people to see in my business or about me that are reflected out through my business? So I think starting there first, writing down, what do I perceive myself, or what do I perceive that people see about me? Then I think the next thing is going out to your peers or your team or people who know you best and saying, okay, now I have my list of what I think my core values are, but how do you perceive me? What do you see in my business?
Market research.
Yes, exactly. And I would pick 8 to 10 people to do this for you and give them all the same list. And again, I've got a little worksheet. We've got a little worksheet that we put together to help with this. But let them choose, and then go back and say, okay, do what I see as my core values, are they what other people see as my core values? And then from there, you kind of have two starting places to put together to then really flesh out what those core values are going to be.
It's,
And then that's kind of becomes your building block of what you're going to build on from there.
it's so hard to step back and see the big picture and or see the forest through the trees because you're focused and and I see my business one way and other people might see it perceived as another way and you're the same in a practice and you might practice my position think that we're the best and we've got the best experience but people might be thinking that no not even close because that's not how my experience is there. So it's great to get feedback from the from your patients and from your peers and your staff.
Mhm.
And also when it comes to core values, I say this to people all the time. You could crow to the cows come home how great you are about your core values, but that's not what you want. You really want other people to say how great you are.
Yes.
And that's where there's a term that came out recently called social proof comes
Hmm.
into play.
Yep.
And that is important. Is I said you could sit there and say we are the best and we deliver this and this and this, but no. The public wants to hear from their peers
Yes.
what your core values are. So where does a practice go wrong when creating their core values, and how do they avoid some of the pitfalls in doing so? Because if they're going to position themselves, they don't want to be too cocky, I guess, right? They don't want to do this, and so what are a few case studies or things that you just tell people is go down the wrong path and it's a train wreck, and and how would they somebody on the future avoid that?
Yeah. So I really think that this comes back to you as the doctor. And if you are saying, well, I'm going to have my office manager come up with our core values, or I'm going to have my team members come up with my core values, that isn't going to go the long haul, right? That's their core values. That's them putting their input, and I think there's this big differentiator between what they see as you as a doctor as my core values, or what they perceive as what they think the core values should be. So
Right.
I think that that's a big pitfall, is putting it in somebody else's hands when it comes to that.
Right.
Another thing that I see is not talking about it. Like I have core values that are set within my own business, and we review those every single time we have a team meeting. And that kind of leads into it also, because we review them so much, it allows my team to talk about decisions and how they make decisions within my company, because they are based on the values of what we have been, our core values. And so I think when we don't, sometimes we pick it, we stick it, but then never talk about it again. And I think that is our big pitfall, is not keeping it in front of us. And it's not enough to have it on a wall that we walk by and it becomes like the fake plant in the corner
Sure.
that nobody pays attention to. I mean, like it is living it, breathing it, talking about it all the time.
Let's take one step back so people might not even understand what a core value is. What are a couple of examples of what a core value is? Because how do they even know how to define it?
Sure.
So what is example of a core value?
Yeah. So like when I think about core values, I think they're like one word. So I'm going to say a core value in my business. One of the words we picked out was honesty, and then I incorporated that into, we will be honest with our assessment of situations that we're in.
All right. So when you're coming up with the core values, and honesty is obviously one that you mentioned there. How do you how do you take that to the next level? What do you do about that?
Yeah. So for instance, honesty being a core value in our business, the next thing we do is we put it into kind of a sentence. So here would be an example of one of mine. We are honest with our assessment of situations. And what that does is it takes that one word, that one core value, honesty, and then puts it into perspective for how my team uses that core value when we're working day in, day out.
I always have a problem getting people to buy into it because this is my core values, but not theirs. So I'm sure that is a big issue that you have with your maybe your staff, or hopefully you're good at getting them involved. But how does a team, how does a practice get the team involved with it and enforce it?
Yeah, so I think again, this comes back to it is up to you as the doctor, you as the office manager, to really make sure that your team hears over and over again what your core values are and then understands how to use them in their daily work life. So if you have your 5 to 7 core values and then we are constantly talking about how do we use these different words, how do we put them into a sentence, how do we put them into practice, then it just becomes the fabric of your daily work, your daily work day, workforce. And then again, what we hope for is it bleeds out into everything else that we're doing, our social presence, the way we interact with the community, the way we act with our dentists, the way our business is perceived should kind of start from where those core values are and how they are acted upon with your team members.
But how do they enforce it? Sure, they could say it, but how do they make sure that it's actually done? Because they're not there, micromanaging or watching the front staff or watching the TC communicate. So how do you have to just hope and pray that they just follow your lead and goal, or what? But what would they put in place? To make sure that because this is their name, it's their practice, their reputation that's out there. Staff comes and goes. But you're building up a business, you're part of a community. You want to make sure that your values are presented the right way. So how
Yep.
do you ensure this?
Yeah. So I think that it's being aware of what your team is saying and doing and correcting behavior or correcting communication that may not be in align with those core values. So if our core value is helpful and we are not answering our taking the time to answer our patients' questions to the fullest of our ability, or and we notice that a team member is constantly cutting people off and being short and not listening, or this, that, and the other. I think as doctors and as team leads or office managers, we have to kind of correct that behavior and say, that the way you're handling this situation doesn't align with the core values, with the way we want to treat our patients. And so we're going to coach you and counsel you on how to do it better so that when you are in this situation again, you're going to be reacting in the way that we are hoping, that aligns more with that core value.
I'm laughing because I had a conversation with somebody today in my company about this, and they got very, very defensive.
Mhm.
And this was not meant to be picking on them at all. This is the way I want my company presented, and the way I want you interacting with the clients. And they get very, very defensive. And as you know, we're in a very different world than you and I grew up in.
Yeah.
And if you're a more seasoned practice or seasoned um, doctor, you grew up in a different world. So now you've got to balance so delicately your staff. So how far do you push somebody in order to make sure they do adhere to your values and enforce it? Because there's always staff turnover. So now when you have a new person and they're not adhering, you might have to get rid of them or train them. And so how do you do so with kid gloves? Because last thing you want, I don't like turnover in my company, but it happens. And as you know, the biggest issue that a practice has is their staff. Keeping them there, getting the right people. So let's talk about that. So with increasing in staff turnover, what do you do when a staff member is not adhering to the practice core values? because you really don't want to have them leave because of that, but you really might not have a choice. So where do you draw the line?
Well, I think what you have to do is self-reflect as a doctor and an office manager and say, how important is it that my team, that the team culture that we have in our offices, how important is it that they adhere to our core values? And if core values are important to you, if it's something that you guys are constantly talking about and going over, I think just naturally, if you have a whole team of people who buy in to the culture of your practice or your business, and you have the one person that does not, it's very easy to see the answer. It may not be what we want, and
Right.
this isn't this is kind of a pinch, but the answer is send them away with love. Let them find another practice, another business, another place that maybe fits and aligns more with their own core values. But you're just not going to, keeping that one person on that rubs the whole team or that doesn't align with where the whole team is going is not fair to the team that is on board and going where you're going, but it's also not fair to that person. If they can't get on the culture train, then send them away with love. They're not meant to be part of your practice.
It's
And
hard to do so. If somebody's been with you for 10, 15, 20 years, but almost your family. And it's how do you get rid of a family member? But at the end of the day, this is your business.
it
And
is.
if you can't get on board and adapt, I mentioned this many, many times in my previous podcast. And I quote the great Billy Bean, baseball executive: adapt or die, for your business. If your business does not adapt and change, your core values might be here, but that also might be the core values of Archie Bunker, or if anybody who knows doesn't know who he is, or Al Bundy doesn't know who he is. I'm just throwing out old school TV references here. So how do you don't want to be associated with that anymore? You have to be very you have to be socially conscious.
Yeah.
And one word gets out there that you don't support this or this or blah blah blah. So you have to make sure that it's kid gloves.
Yeah.
So now the next question is, and we can talk about this when it comes to marketing your practice. All right, what would you suggest as a couple of ways to incorporate your values in it? Now, let's take before we answer that, let's take a step back. There's a difference between your image and your brand and your values.
Yes.
Okay, values is the way that you, I guess, want to position a, to be a cool hipster office. It's not a value. Okay, it's a perception, it's an image, but it's not a value. So, what would you say are a few ways for you as a practice owner or who's listening, practice owner, to incorporate one or two of your values into your marketing?
Sure. And I'm sure you will be able to answer this. I can't wait to hear what you say about this. But here would be like a couple examples. Let's say you picked out that you are a practice that wants to really educate your patients. You really want to stand on the pillar of, we want to be educational, not only good at what we do, but we want to make sure that our patients understand what we're doing. Well, I'm just going to use an example of social media posting. Maybe as part of the pillars that you're picking, and I always suggest that offices pick, two or three pillars that they're going to help build their posts around. Well, if education is a core value and education can be built into a pillar that you're going to use, let's just say in some of your social media posts, maybe you're going to make sure that at least 3 or 4 times, a month, you guys are going to have a post that helps educate whoever is out there watching, following your patients, your audience out there on something that maybe they don't know or should know about your practice, orthodontics, whatever your passion is. So I think that's just like one example, very, very small. And when we look at marketing, you know this better than I do. I mean, like that's like one little cherry on the big tree, right? But I feel like that's a easy, I think, example to think of how could that roll into something super simple, like social media posting, let's just say.
So my response to that, or add on to that, is you have, when you put a post up, and before you even hit the word post, you have to think of my favorite radio station, WIIFM. What's in it for me? And what's in it for me is the person who is seeing your post, not from your perspective as the doctor, because at the end of the day, you want that post to be shared. You want your patients or the community to spread the word and share it with their friends, and that's how you build up your practice and the brand. There's nothing worse than having a catch and throwing it, the balls will come back. All right, that's like putting a post up and nobody sees it; it goes into a black hole. So by educating and putting a post up, and by having your values in it, make sure the one bit of advice that I would say is, what's in it for me as the person who sees it, and why would they share it? Make sure
Yeah.
they would care about it, not you. So you have to really think. So if your value is education, you want to do it. Well, don't educate people the way you want to be educated. Think about it from their perspective and give them a reason to respond to it, to comment on it, to share it, to have some sort of action on it. Otherwise, it just falls flat and it doesn't do any good. And that is by far the only way to really expand your reach in the community and to get what I mentioned before, social proof.
Yeah.
Social proof is letting other people say how great you are through social media, not you doing it. And nothing stands better than somebody who is willing to share your post or comment on it and tell their friends and say, hey, here's a great post I saw. What do you think? Or adding it to a blog or something in a forum. So that's important. So if you're take one step back, guys, and if you have a value, and say, education is a big part of your life, and you want to, in your big passion of yours, take one step back, and your education message has to be so simple, so easy to read. Within 3 seconds, people have to be able to see your whole message. Nobody's going to read 4 or 5 sentences. Okay, so how do you educate somebody in 6, 7 words? Okay, not anything more than that is too much.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to keep it really simple, very visual. Nobody reads, so if there's a way for you to pass on your information either through a video format or through very, very little words, that's the way to pass on your core values. And then ask the community to do so. If you've got a very outgoing type A patient who is very out there and loves to be on social media, ask them if they'd be willing to, interact with you. And can I ask you a question to do a quick interview? Would you mind, talking about your experience here and how we're educated, and let them do it and put it on their social media. And if you don't ask, you're not going to get. That's a great tip there, is by asking for having a social media or an internal marketing program in place to ask your patients to do so. Think about it. You have a captive audience for 10, 15 minutes every time somebody's there. What are you asking them to do? If you don't ask them to give you a review, they're not going to. If you don't ask them for a referral, they're not going to. If you don't ask them to be active on social media with you, they're not going to. So this here is part of building up your core values again, and make sure your staff buys into it. And you're gonna get pushback, like, I'm so busy, I can't have time for that, blah blah blah. Do you know how long it takes to say, would you mind giving us a review? Let's count that again. Would you mind giving us a review? 4 seconds. If they don't have 4 seconds of their day, I think it's time to have that talk. Okay. Well, are you happy? Would you have anybody that might be interested in our practice? Give us a referral. 5 seconds. Hey, we're active on social media now. Would you be cool with taking a video or asking us, answering a few questions? 5 seconds. That's it. If you don't ask, you don't get. And you don't want to do this constantly, but just pick a few people here or there, and it will be a difference maker. So you have to really have multiple, in my eyes, multiple steps involved. One is you have to come up with your core value, and potentially have a visual, or have it in a triangle. There's a very famous triangle of values from John Wooden, who was a basketball coach. I mean, if you've ever seen his triangle of success, and it's basically, it's like a pyramid of different values and how you build things up from your life, and not even just basketball. Very, very powerful piece there. So you have a visual, where you bring it up in your meetings, like you said. Then from there, you don't just bring it up. What's the next steps there, guys? Sure, you told your staff, but what are they doing with it? Okay, you have to think outside your four walls. Okay, and right now, with social media, the world is your office, not just your four walls. So by having a correct message, a correct team to deliver that message, and then the correct distribution of that message is the golden triumph in my eyes there.
Yeah.
And that's how in my eyes, from a marketing perspective, is how you need to do it, and you have to have your team involved. Okay, and that's really important when it comes to marketing. Marketing is by far the number one investment you'll ever make in your practice, or in anything. Unless you bought, Amazon on the IPO, or you bought Microsoft when it was $1. That marketing is going to be your biggest investment and biggest return on it. And you should see 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10x on your marketing if you do it correctly. But again, you have to have, as Jill said, the right message, the right team, and the right program in place there. So, Jill, one last question for part one here, as when it comes to building core values. Is there any type of information or resources that you could suggest to somebody to do so? Because we're at the end of this podcast, guys. You can take a look at a link, and we're gonna put in there I'll mention it in a bit. If you go to orthomarketing.com/dream team, you will see some great downloadable worksheets, some good information on there, some good ways to build up the core values, things to include on that. So, Jill, let's talk a little bit about the information or resources that will be available to somebody for your core values.
Yeah, yeah. So I think part of this worksheet that we're going to be, that they're going to be able to access is, really helping, doctors really, like we talked about, go through and define what those goals are. How did they interpret their personal goals? Then a worksheet on how to give that out to friends, family, team members to establish it, and then to really help you guys bring it all together. So I think that tool in and of itself is going to be, super, super valuable for anybody who's listening. And the one thing I want to say is this doesn't matter if you did this, if you're a more established practice, maybe you did this 10 years ago. And here's what I know is, like you've said before, if you're not, we're always evolving. And I think even our core values can change and evolve as our businesses
Of course, as a person, you have a different value now than you did when you were 18, and different when you were 25 and 40 and whatever, 50. Your values always change, and and the practice values change. So you always have to update your information. Yeah.
Yep, yep. So I think that, going through this exercise, I think might be really good for a lot of people out there, for helping them just kind of reassess, are my core values that were in place still in place? Does my team, and I'm going to point this out because we all know we all have new team members post COVID. We all have new team members. But does our post-COVID team members know what was in place pre-COVID? Potentially, maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe this is a perfect time to just say, clean slate, try again. Let's start again. Let's implement some new values. Let's implement some new ways to keep it in front of my team and my team meetings and whatnot, and move forward. So I think that this little white sheet that we're going to have is going to be a wonderful tool that we've created to help people start with that. Beyond that, there's lots of books and different podcasts and stuff out there that people can it's all about core values and different things. But I feel like this is going to be just a great tool that people are going to want to download and incorporate into their practices.
Right. So again, go to orthomarketing.com/dream team, and you'll be able to see all this great information, resources, worksheets across the board there. So guys, this was part one, and remember this, we got 2 more to go. So stay tuned. The next episode that Jill and I will talk about, which will be coming up soon, is drafting a winning team. All right. And, in that, let's talk a little bit of a preview there. What have been some of the highlights that people look forward to when it comes to drafting a winning team?
Yes. So I'm super excited about this one because we're going to really be talking about how we take these core values and, and build that into value-based decision making. So how do we work with that and then move it into, making decisions with that, but also really thinking about, we've got this great team, but how do we make sure they're in the right place, and within our office, and then how does that work into our marketing as well? And we can look at that from the initial phone call, to the treatment coordinator, to the leads that come in. So we're going to be talking about all of that in this next session.
Great. So, Jill, thank you so much. This was so much fun, very educational. Guys, listen, this is so important to do. You have to have the right program in place. Think about it. When you are putting aligners on somebody, you have to have a game plan. When you put somebody in aligner one, then two, then three, then blah blah blah. You don't put them in 17 and then to four, and then nine, and then eight. There's a right process in place. And when building up your practice, building up your team, building up your marketing, building up your business, you have to have a right roadmap in place. And that's kind of, hopefully this will give you a little bit of insight in how to do so.
Yep.
So Jill, thank you so much. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Remember, go to orthomarketing.com/dream team for this information. Stay tuned for part 2. And everybody, enjoy. Happy marketing, happy smiles, be safe, wash your hands, and enjoy. Life is short, guys, so make it fun. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Orthomarketing.com. 360-degree digital marketing solutions for your practice.